I'm Neil Simcock. This is my esteemed colleague, Simon Ross. So we're from the project Reducing Energy Consumption Through Community Knowledge Networks. So it's part of the same Energy and Communities group Raj was just talking about. So thankfully he's gone through that, so we don't need to, which is good. So we're a much smaller project actually. I'm the sole full-time researcher on this. But yeah, we're going to talk today a bit about our findings. We're coming towards the end now. The project's finishing at the end of August, so we're starting to gather some findings together. So we're going to talk through a few of those with you. We're going to talk about community knowledge networks, an interactive approach to energy learning. And actually, it's quite nice because the other presentations that have been before are kind of resonating with our own findings as well. So it's nice to know that we're probably along the right tracks. And Simon, do you want to come and just...
So my interest really in the project, as the rest of the Keele team call me an activist, which is quite flattering. I have this sort of interesting role to play. So working for an energy charity in the West Midlands, we seek to present ourselves as honest brokers, working with community groups, local businesses, big businesses as well, and individuals. And we're seeking to really find a way forward around sustainable energy and working with communities. I was really drawn to this project because we've been at this for getting on for nearly 20 years now. Personally, I've been at it for about 7. And there is a kind of growing sense, certainly in my own mind, that a lot of what we've been doing in the past just really isn't working. So I was very drawn to this opportunity with Keele. I've been very grateful for the opportunity to engage with that in the hope that perhaps that might show us some new processes to help kind of take our own work forward. I'm just really going to set the context before I hand you back to Neil to talk about the detail of the project. The energy trilemma, I'm sure you'll be aware of this. This is really the background to the project. It's really the UK energy policy, and also it's our own objectives that we have as a charitable organisation as well. So cost, security, and obviously trying to decarbonise our own energy supply. The UK policy response, as we see it as a project, is that market forces will sort that out, and competitive funding will somehow kind of sort all those problems. I think in my own experience working for a charity, I'm not entirely sure that's appropriate. We have lots of conversations with energy companies who change the goalposts at very short notice. It's extremely hard for us as a kind of honest broker to understand that picture, to then take that and try and turn that downhill into the communities and the individuals we work with, sometimes becomes virtually impossible. There's also a sense around the UK policy response that we see that individuals are seen as isolated individuals who just require some more information, pour some more information into them, and eventually they'll pick up the phone and do the measure that you want them to undertake. So again, I think there's a sense of us through the project that that's really not the case. So those social interactions in which the individuals operate at community or work or whatever those networks are largely ignored at the moment by UK energy policy. And it's also ignoring the fact that many individuals have a considerable degree of knowledge in some cases, certainly around their own circumstances at home. So through this project, we're really interested in how might those sort of social settings work better, how might a kind of knowledge flow and information flow between communities, how does that work, how might we maximise that. I think at this stage we're not suggesting an alternative to what UK government is coming up with, but I think we're suggesting that there might be an interesting alternative, and we'd like to know more about that alternative and how we might kind of maximise that in the future. I'll now hand you back to Neil to talk about the content of the project.
Simon basically said the aims there. So really, I guess we're interested in how people learn about energy and energy saving, and kind of what's the potential for community approaches to help in doing that. Probably a key difference actually from this project and Raj's one and the LEAF project before is that we're not actually studying community groups that are already ongoing, I suppose. I mean, we picked 2 towns, and the participants of our project aren't involved in kind of, any low energy community group or anything like that. They're just what you might describe, I suppose, as the average householder, although obviously there's a lot of variation between them as well. But yeah, we picked 55 participants from 2 towns. So Shrewsbury was one, Newcastle-under-Lyme was the other, and then 2 kind of communities, as it were, within each of those towns. And kind of our rationale here, I suppose, was that Shrewsbury's a relatively affluent town, and certainly the communities we picked in Newcastle-under-Lyme are quite what you might describe as economically deprived. So different context in that sense. And the findings we're talking about today, these are based on 55 householder interviews we did. We've got 8 focus groups there, but it's actually 12. But yeah, 12 focus groups and 4 co-designed interventions, which I won't kind of describe now because Simon's going to talk about them shortly, so you'll hear. So basically, we're kind of, in a way, the title of the presentation suggesting our alternative interactive approach to energy learning, but kind of as a basis for that at the start of the project, we were trying to find out, okay, so how do people actually learn about energy in the first place, and how do they perceive the sorts of different information that's out there available to them, and what are the types of factors that are, influence this perception or this assessment they're making of information. So we kind of got our findings on this, and we split it into 3 broad categories, which I'll talk through. So the first kind of relates to the content of information that you're receiving. So is it relevant and can I understand it? The second is the source of the information, so who's it coming from? And the third is quite the important one, the process for which the information is communicated. So I'll just kind of talk through each of these very briefly. First, relating to the content of information. So basically we found that information had to be contextualized, it had to be tailored as much as possible for people to see it as relevant to their own circumstances. So basically this is in one or two ways. So you talk about information relating to consumption levels. It was kind of the idea amongst our participants that, in terms of measuring energy consumption, CO2 emissions and kilowatt hours, to them was completely confusing and abstract. It didn't mean anything if you saw, they had energy display monitors, but if you saw that your energy was lowering on kilowatt hours, what did that mean? Whereas if it was expressed in monetary terms, then it was kind of a term that was already universally understood. It already was linked to their pre-existing frames of understanding, if you want to put it that way. So it allowed them to sort of see ideas of high and low, good and bad levels of consumption, as it were, particularly when that was put in the context of comparison to others on the project as well. That was something they really valued. And then there's sort of the information related to the practicalities of how to do things in the home, so how to take action. And again, best tailored to circumstances, i.e. to their home, their existing practices, things they already did. But also we found people felt they wanted this to take into account what they already knew. So one of the problems with these kind of top-down, generalised information campaigns that you might see is that it treats everyone as the same, and a lot of the time people are saying that they receive stuff, hang on, I already knew that anyway, I'm ahead of there, or this is just repeating the same old message, which to them just kind of became patronising, frustrating. So they wanted something that was much more personal, much more tailored to them. And I'll just skip that one because we haven't got much time. So, and then just onto the sources of information. So absolutely crucial was the trustworthiness of the source. So this is basically linked to the perceived motives of the person you're sort of hearing information from, I suppose. So if you perceive that it's in their interests, I suppose, to provide you with honest and accurate information, then you're more likely to trust it. So sadly, businesses often untrusted, I suppose, unsurprisingly. Lots of stories about door knockers and cold callers and things like that. I think Simon would kind of emphasise there's this problem here because, at some point businesses will install measures and are good at providing detailed information in some degree, some might argue anyway, so they do need to be trusted at some stage. And what we found in terms of trusted sources, you're talking about charities, family, friends and peers, occasionally the local authority and national government as well, because they're more trusted, they're perceived not to have the agenda of trying to sell you a product, which is, businesses are information seen as being quite partial, they're providing it to you so that they can sell you their goods. And also Simon's made the point there, trust levels can change with experience as well. So if you have kind of a positive experience of someone, the way they talk to you, your interaction, which we'll talk about later, that can help build trust. So it's not a static thing that's, all businesses are totally untrusted because of their motives. There is ways of building trust and building those bridges. And then also this is also related to the source of information. It's what we termed expertise. But it's essentially about the competence, or the perceived competence at least, and level of knowledge of the source of information. We found certainly that of course people see experts as very important. They're very keen to tell us that, and they know what they're talking about. They're able to provide this kind of detailed, tailored advice that we mentioned earlier. But also perhaps more surprising, perhaps not to people in this room, was how much people recognise the value of peers or getting information not from experts, just from peers, what other kind of everyday households, I suppose. And this was something we saw, they told us this both in the interviews, but also something we found out firsthand in the focus groups as well, how much people were talking and sharing ideas, and in the interventions we ran. So one is that you can kind of learn from the experiences of others. If someone's already been out and done something, you can learn from their experience. They're in a similar position to you. You can learn from that. And also, this didn't come out in the interviews so much, but we found this at the focus groups, was it also allows that kind of comparing of convention, sort of your normal habits that you never really actually think about until you're actually talking with others and you start comparing what other people are doing. You then start reflecting on your own household practices, things you generally take for granted. And kind of, I suppose, what binds this all together is what we're terming the process of communication. So what we found is this kind of rejection or complaints about the top-down model. So comes from expert down to passive recipient. There's no interaction there, it's just a one-way flow. It's seen as a transmission or a transfer of information, as if that's how it works. So what we found was that people were talking much more about this interactive kind of alternative, which I believe Simon's going to come up and pick up on that.
Okay, so looking really at the sort of the interactive alternative and where some of our thinking and some of research has got to around this, there is a reflection that it takes time. We heard quite a lot from the first two presenters about LEAF and the burnout that goes with trying to deliver a 3-month project. We're looking here at probably a number of years before an individual maybe comes to a point where they're able to pick up the phone and commit to putting PV in or insulation. So there is a disconnect between the processes that are available in terms of funding to support community activity and the time actually it takes for individuals and communities to come to a decision. Other benefits that we found through working with our householders, that by having a sort of interactive approach, it makes the information much more relevant for the householder. A householder can come to a group setting, they can draw out the information that they want, they can take out as much as they want, they can interrogate that situation, and they can make that information much more relevant to themselves without feeling threatened, without feeling pressurised by a cold caller or a door knocker. It can very much help to build trust. It allows an opportunity, by doing it collectively, for people to scrutinise the information that's available, to ask questions of the person or the company that's providing that information. And through that process, we found that actually confidence can grow. So it's not enough yet to kind of sort of change things radically, but we have found evidence of people's confidence growing through the opportunity of sharing knowledge and information on energy. And Rajat mentioned this as well. Without a shadow of doubt, there is a social context and people enjoy the social interaction of just simply coming together, of meeting friends and neighbours who they don't know, and actually sharing knowledge on energy reduction techniques or energy generation technologies. And all of that helps to make energy knowledge more visible. So Neil mentioned a couple of interventions that we have done. So really bearing all that in mind, we sought to co-design a couple of interventions, 4 altogether, with our 2 communities. And the aim really behind this was thinking about the interactive alternative, the knowledge that was currently available in the community. We wished to understand the knowledge that different householders had and to try and find a way of maximising local people sharing that knowledge amongst their own networks. So each community came up with 2 different interventions. Top left, we had an energy advice stall at a Christmas market. And again, we had a combination just of householders, so these aren't sort of transition groups or Friends of the Earth groups, they're routine householders working with energy experts, so a combination in order to run that stall and then just talking to members of the public who are coming past. Top right, an energy advice coffee morning, and there we sought to use the householders from that part of the community, talking about electricity monitoring devices or tariff switching, relatively straightforward things, but things where people felt comfortable and seeking to advise others at that coffee morning. Energy question time, bottom left, again seeking to an opportunity for the local community to bring questions to an expert panel. We made sure we had a local person on that expert panel and a local charitable representative, but also looking to maximise the feedback. So not just for a householder to ask the question and get the response from a so-called expert, but also then for the householder to talk about their experiences and to be sharing that in a community setting. And the final community, we've got Nora there just talking about her energy reduction strategies at home in this ex-coal mining community, and again just trying to use her local knowledge and experience through a newsletter to try and encourage others. All very positive feedback from all those who've been involved with those. I suppose the big question is what happens when the Keele University support and the funding then moves on. What's going to happen next year when the project finishes? That's always the big question mark, and I think we all probably kind of know the answer to that. But an experience which people enjoyed in a social setting, and I think to our mind in terms of community knowledge networks, all starting to suggest that there is something in knowledge networks as a vehicle to helping spread energy reduction advice. And then the final slide, I'm a practitioner, the project finishes at the end of August. What am I going to do with any of this knowledge that I've acquired through the project? So courtesy of the Centre for Sustainable Energy, thank you Bridget, we have an energy reduction project working with 2 communities. The community here is defined as those who share a same electricity substation. So there'll be 170 homes in this project kicking off in September. And in terms of how I structure that project, some ways that I'll be taking the learning from this research project and bringing this into the practical project, looking to identify those who have already made changes, to understand those changes that they've made in their own lifestyles in that local community, and then looking to magnify the benefits of their learning and their experience to others in their community. To be careful about the language that I use. I'm always very tempted to maybe talk about kilowatt hours and tons of CO2, but I need to be very, very careful before I kind of get into that space and maybe try and keep it more at the monetary level. Keep it social. I mean, we've had, obviously the comment about social interaction and bringing people together to share that knowledge feels important. And also the need to make sure I bring in different sources of information, be that website, be that blue-collar worker, be that sort of peer-to-peer neighbour learning. And also to keep the interventions flexible. There is a tendency as a charity perhaps to design a range of interventions in the privacy of my own office and then to take those to the community saying, ta-da, this is what we're going to do. But I need to try and make sure I keep those flexible and respond to how circumstances are evolving in the community. And I think really finally then three kind of watchwords for me to have at the back of my mind. Looking to build trust, not just in myself but amongst the community, looking to build confidence that actually those people in that community do have knowledge which is of value, and actually trying to encourage them to have the confidence to share that with friends and peers, and trying to make that just trying to facilitate that conversation about energy, to say, look, you can have that conversation, it is a good thing to be having, and it can be of benefit not just to you but to your community as well. And that's the end of our presentation, Robin.